I'm Bill Palmasino, School Board President, and welcome to the Grand Forks Public Schools District Number 1 and the Grand Forks Air Force Base District Number 140 Public Forum. We are pleased that you have joined us here tonight. We are looking forward to having a productive evening with all of you providing input for the opportunities and the challenges that we lie ahead. At this time, may I ask everybody to rise, look at the flag for our Pledge of our Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. At this time, I would like to introduce the members of the Grand Forks City School Board. As I call your name up, please rise. Amber Flynn, Vice President. Jackie Hoffert. Dr. Cynthia Schwab. Doug Carpenter. Dr. Eric Lund. Jeff Manley. And Shannon Mikula and Matt Spivey are at work. At this time, I would like to introduce President of the Grand Forks School Board, Louis.
First off, thank you. I'm Louis Asasi. I'm the president of the Grand Forks School Board out at the Air Base, District 140. I'm grateful for you to be here tonight and spend your time. While we're considered two separate school districts, District 140 and District 1, but we're still considered one Grand Forks. Tonight, during the activities and participation, I want you to think about Twining Elementary and middle school. They're going to come up in tonight's conversations, and I want to say, just think about us. I'd like to introduce my fellow board members, Ms. Michelle Shepard, Vice President, Mr. John Dela Cruz, and not present today is Ms. Ann O'Rourke and Samantha Plemons. At this time, I'd like to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Presidents Bill and Presidents Lewis. Thank you very much. Good evening, and welcome again, and thank you again for participating in tonight's public forum. It's a privilege, and I mean that from my heart and my head, to lead District 1 and District 140 in tandem with both school boards and with our entire administrative team. No matter how you slice it, Grand Forks is a great place to grow and learn, and our pre-K through 12 education system is foundational to perpetuate why people want to live, work, and play here. As a community member for 25 years, my family has no desire to live anywhere else. I've traveled to many states, I've lived in various countries, and I've observed educational systems all across the world. And there's no place like Grand Forks and Grand Forks Air Force Base. And that concept was substantiated with our 5 community meetings and through our Thought Exchange e-portal in September, when we heard a resounding applause for those who work with our kids, colleagues at the building level, teachers, principals, paraprofessionals, and support staff. The schoolhouse is where it happens, and we want to ensure that all of our campuses can meet the demands of high quality and engaging educational environments. The community who supports our schools with tax dollars deserves nothing than the best. Tonight, we want to set the stage for the next generation of learners. That's our goal. But to achieve that goal, your voices are necessary, your perspectives are desired, and your input will influence the direction we go well into the future. So here's how we're going to frame this evening. I'm going to lead off with a high-level overview of the district's newly strategic plan, which is in draft form, and then Site Log IQ, which is formerly known as UNESCO. We've been saying UNESCO for the last several months. Brian Peters, engineer lead, Gavin Benson, project manager, and Tom Weber, senior business consultant with Site Log IQ. They are going to present information on the community engagement process, which would be booklet number 2 that you have in your hands. Following our presentation, we're going to ask you to go to your breakout rooms. Those of you who pre-registered have that room assignment and all the paperwork in your hands. If you don't have a pre-assigned room, we will help direct you in the back of the room at one of the doors, either on the east or the west side of the building, and we'll make sure you get into a focus group for conversation. And when you get to those breakout rooms, there's going to be some refreshments right outside of those rooms. So special thanks to Emily Carl, our child nutrition director, for providing that this evening. So any questions that you have following this large group presentation will be answered or may be answered in the small group conversation. So booklet number 1 that you have is a resource document for you when you get into the small group conversation. So at the conclusion of the small group breakout, one final exit question will be made available to you, and we hope you will answer that question using Thought Exchange. We're going to have 50 Chromebooks in this environment, so as you leave your breakouts, if you want to come back and use district technology, you're welcome to do that to answer an exit question. If you have your own technology with you, an iPhone, that works. You can respond to that question on your way out, or you can actually take that question home with you and spend the next few days answering that one very simple question. And we will have that electronic link for you both in print, and the electronic link will be made available for you and to you tomorrow on our district website. And we want to conclude our evening by 9 o'clock this evening. So you'll be with us in this space for about 40 minutes, and then we'll get you to the most important place, and that's where your voice can be heard. All of the comments and suggestions made in the small group exercise will be collated in a final report, which will be made available to all of you in the coming weeks. Finally, and you're going to hear more about this when Mr. Weber comes up, if you are willing to serve on the facilities task force that's going to be mentioned this evening, we have hard copies of that application in the breakout session rooms. And so if you'd like to complete one of those forms before you leave, we'd be happy to collect those and hand them off to Mr. Weber and his team before they leave. They will be the collectors and collators of people applying for the task force. We hope to have approximately 40 people engaged in the process. These will be community members. These will be people like you, diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives across our community. There won't be any administrators or school board members on the task force. It will be your work and your voice to come to some recommendation or recommendations to the school board over the course of the next several months. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and launch into our district strategic plan, again from a high level. So why plan for the future? That's always the first question. You can see on the slide that planning for the future is an essential strategic process for all organizations, and this will help us set the course for the future. It embraces inevitable change that we face in our own community, and it helps to keep our organization current and relevant, and it creates a proactive versus reactive organizational environment. A comprehensive strategic plan includes both the academic and operational aspects of a school district as identified in the district's accreditation process. And by the way, we have an accreditation team here in Grand Forks right now working with our school district. They came in last night, met with our executive cabinet level team, and they're visiting schools today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, and they'll be providing an exit report on Wednesday afternoon to the school board, which also is open to the community at 3:15 on Wednesday afternoon. So there are 3 pieces of this strategic plan. One is the leadership capacity domain. Number 2 is learning capacity domain. That's what we're all about. And number 3 is the resources. Do we have the resources aligned with what our greatest needs and greatest priorities are? And that will be a piece of the conversation that you're going to help us with, and certainly what the task force will help us with as well. So getting into the 3 high-level overview strategic initiatives, again in draft form. We will focus on academics, and we're framing this, and I don't want to get into all the educational speak because your eyes will start glazing over, but we are framing this under some research-vetted framework called High Reliability Schools, and it's all rooted in Dr. Bob Marzano's research. So we're happy to announce that academic engagement and strategies for student success is going to be a focus, and we are listening to what our students are saying to us, whether they're elementary, middle, or high school. They want to talk about relevance, they want rigor, and they want learning spaces that might look a little bit differently than what some of us experienced in this room when we were going to school. Professional learning and technology will be a piece of it, and innovation and creativity. And the good news with innovation and creativity is the governor has given us great latitude to reinvent what schools look like, what they sound like, and what students experience, and what teachers experience. And we're grateful for that opportunity. Next, one of our big buckets, as our consultant would call it, is having a comprehensive school district mental health system. I think those of you who are parents in the room understand and know the challenges that public education faces. I would say that this is a crisis in the time of our country, where we have students who don't know how, don't understand how to self-regulate emotionally, behaviorally, and socially. And that's been a challenge on our system. And so we've taken this on as something that we want to be part of the solution, because it's one thing to talk about academics and content standards, but if a student doesn't know how to behaviorally, socially, or emotionally regulate him or herself, nothing else matters. We used to say that about reading. Now we're talking about that from a social emotional perspective. And so you can see the four key components under that, and I will just highlight that number 4, community engagement. Our school district has taken the lead to work with all agencies across our community. Jeff Gockler is our new mental health coordinator, and he has created a coalition of well over 100 people who have come together on a regular basis to talk about this very issue, to talk about how we can work together, how we can find opportunities for kids who are challenged. And we're optimistic that we're going to be able to create and identify some goals that happen locally rather than having to look externally to find support for our students. And then finally, resource management and long-term planning. This also is where you are going to weigh in this evening. Master facilities planning. I don't think it's a secret that we've been on talk radio just about every other week talking about our financial challenges with our 19 campuses. We have what is considered to be a $77 million deferred maintenance bill. That number could be higher, depends on how you want to slice it. But nonetheless, we want all of you to be part of that long-term planning as we talk about our facilities. And technology is a piece of that, and that's something that is ever-changing, and we need to have a budget that supports that. And then the long-term financial planning is also a piece of where we're at and where we're going. So that is the high-level overview. And I would just add maybe a couple of more comments that something that we want to study in the very near future is making sure we have environments for all students that treat them, teach them, and work with them in the least restrictive manner. And so that'll be a study that we'll be doing internally before we launch that as a public conversation. And then with the strategic plan, we will review this as a formative process. We'll have this in front of the school board on a regular basis so they can see that the deliverables that we said we were going to deliver are actually happening. And beneath all of this is a lot of detail, but I just wanted to give you a high-level overview and then really get out of your way and introduce Brian Larson, who is going to start getting into the community engagement piece of tonight's conversation. Brian.
Thank you very much, Dr. Larson. I appreciate the introduction, Dr. Brenner. Thank you all for being here this evening. If this were a hockey game, we just finished the first period. I'm starting the second period. It's going to go fairly quickly. I have about 10 minutes. I'm going to hit about 19 slides. I'm glad to see you all have copies of the slide deck, so if you look in the head, it's all my slides are going to have pictures. I'm going to take us to the wants, needs, and desires, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tom to finish off and talk about the third period. Oh, the other direction caught me. So the long-term resource planning process. It starts with today, it's been going on for quite a long time, and the objective is we understand and know there are a lot of needs in the district. There's more money, there's not enough money to address everything that we want. In fact, we probably want even more than we have in the facilities today. So the key is prioritization. Key is understanding what's important to the district, to you, to everybody in this room. When we look to the future, we ask ourselves, where are we today? What is the situation? What is the challenges that we face today with your current infrastructure? Where do we want to be? Those are the opportunities. That's what we want our school district to look like. Oh, one more. And how do we get there? Through the process of the task force, and if you have an opportunity to engage, I encourage you, and it's the best part of the whole process, is the community involvement, your involvement and feedback and input as to what's most important. And that process of how do we get there is determined through that task force. A couple slides on the process. We talk a lot about what are the needs of the district. I would like to think of it a few different ways. Physical needs on the left-hand side, those are needs of the infrastructure, your building. Scott and Chris are very familiar with the facility needs today. So a lot of that is based upon your asset condition, your assets in your facilities, the roofs, et cetera. Those are the physical needs. The educational needs, how is the facility serving the teaching environment? How is it supporting that classroom? And the functional needs. Sorry, got a little happy with the clicker. Functional needs, the activities for the community. Focusing on the physical needs, again, there's a lot of buttons up here. These are the attributes that support the physical needs of the building. These are everything from the rooftop to the blacktop. Every asset in your facility, all the lights that are in the walls, the HVAC condition in the boilers, the chillers, everything that you don't see is part of this list of all of those systems. Working with Scott and Chris, we'll have a plan developed and needs for those assets. And any community input, if you have issues with temperature control issues, some units are too noisy, all of that is valuable feedback for the administration to develop this master plan. I like this graphic because it looks at a facility and what are the challenges. And just like if you own a car, you know that if you buy a brand new car, if you're lucky enough to do so, you know at the first couple of years it's all under warranty, it's all brand new, there's very little cost. But over time, in a long time, if you have a car 10 or 12 years, which I do, the cost gets to be a lot more expensive to maintain that car. And if anybody owns a car from the 60s and 70s, well, fantastic, I wish I did. They can be very expensive to maintain, but they're wonderful vehicles. You have some infrastructure here that's wonderful. It's just old and more expensive to maintain. Over time, it becomes less efficient and less effective for sponsoring for the classroom environment. That, coupled with the challenges of increasing budget pressures, makes it a challenge for maintaining the facilities. Here's a chart that briefly describes each of your facilities. The orange bars represent the original building age, and if there were any additions to those buildings, that brings down the average age of those buildings, and that's represented by the blue dots, ranging from over 100 years at Central High School to just under a few years old for Discovery. And the average is over 40 years old. I'm in my 40s. Not happy to share that, but I could say at over 40 years old, I'm getting old, and you have a lot of aging facilities. That doesn't mean they're bad. In fact, you've made a lot of improvements to those buildings. You've added windows, you've replaced infrastructure, a lot of things that were needed. There are some systems that haven't been addressed. So that's part of the plan, is to look at not just the building age, but look at the conditions of the assets in the buildings. When we look at making improvements in the facility, we have a very keen focus on the student achievement. For example, if we're going to make a change in the lighting, let's look at daylighting options. Daylighting options make it even better for students when you have natural daylight in facilities. Acoustics, if it's noisy in the classroom, it's hard to hear the teacher speak. So we want to look at ventilation systems, perhaps, that also are quieter. A lot of different ways to address those issues, but we want to have the focus on the students, on your family and your kids. I have a few slides that look at benchmarking. So when we look at the facilities, we also want to see how Grand Forks Schools compares to the peers, your peers. in the state of North Dakota with enrollment, you can see the largest school districts in the state of North Dakota. And you're sitting right at number 5, pretty close to Minot as well. So it's you have a fairly good-sized district in terms of the facilities, and I think you knew that already. But maybe what you didn't know is the costs, the operation and maintenance expenses, and how you compare to your peers. These are expenses to continually operate and maintain the infrastructure you have today. You're still in the top 5, maybe sneaked up a few spots, but it's still getting more expensive to maintain this equipment. And as new equipment comes in, it lowers, you have the potential to spend less on maintenance. So that's the challenge. We have a bucket for operational spending. Operational budgets include your maintenance and repairs, the utility expenses, technology including in there. But we also have a capital budget. Capital budget is planned for the larger projects, maybe a new window replacement or additions or large remodels. The challenge is to balance that with revenue. Revenue, from the perspective of the school district, comes in the form of bonds of borrowing money, levies as taxes, and grants is considered free money, perhaps from the federal government or other sources. Quick slide again, the same peers of eight districts, yourself included. You can see where you lie in terms of your mill rate. The mill rate is the tax, your general tax in comparison for the school district. Overall, the expenses are a challenge when you have more expenses than you have revenue coming in. And that's this challenge that we face with this master planning process. I like these slides, and I can say when I went to school, I sat in a classroom that had rows and rows of chairs. I feel like I got a good education, went on to college, but I remember sitting in the chair. Now, it wasn't a black and white photo if we had a class photo. But it was still, I can relate to that, and it had not changed for years. And it's different for our kids, and my kids go to school, and they come home with iPads. And having that technology is different for us. Even the math has changed. It's a new math as well. I'm not critiquing, I'm just saying things have changed for our students. And in the 21st century classroom, there's a lot more collaborative learning environments, a lot more flexible space. So when you look at how the space is utilized architecturally, there's a lot of new ways, better ways to provide a learning environment for the students. And this doesn't mean it costs a lot of money because you have new furniture, it just means you're making the space flexible for future learnings. Here's an example of hydroponics in a classroom. This might have been a wood shop. Again, making that space flexible so you can have a wood shop, and perhaps you can also have a hydroponics area. There are new challenges for the future of education. That includes drones. I didn't have any drone classes when I went to school. They didn't even exist. But now there's classes that have flying of drones as well as robotics. My daughter was in robotics for a class, and it was fantastic. What a great experience they are, learning so much about how to build something, how to work with a team, and how to participate, and then go to the competitions and to see that collaboration. These are the environments that we want to foster, have the building space that supports that kind of a space. And we don't know where that's going to go in the future for their career opportunities. The average person now changes jobs 5 or 6, 7 times throughout their career. When I was younger, we didn't change jobs. So that's changing as well. So being flexible and helping them learn technology and have it be a natural part of the classroom is a good thing. And that can include robots in agriculture as well. Covered a lot of topics, hopefully gave you some things to consider. There's a lot of wants, needs, and desires, and a lot of those may be on these bubbles here. When we break out into the breakout sessions, think of some of those things that you would like to see, and maybe what your kids have shared with you that they like to really help you to guide the district. For the next step of the planning process, I'd now like to turn it over to Tom Weber.
Okay, so challenges and opportunities, even though we only talked about them for a couple of minutes here, can sort of be a little bit mind-blowing when we try to predict the future in both of those areas. But I have to tell you, in working with school districts across the Midwest, a school board member in my own home school district, what you guys are doing here, this process that you're engaging on, is just really exciting to see, and not something that you see in all districts. And so I'm really excited to see where you guys go in the future here with this, because it is really exciting work. Understanding, hopefully you're seeing too a bit of a line of sight between the strategic plan and what the needs of our students are going through the resources that we need and are required to support that plan from a facility, a technology, budget standpoint. And as we talk about this, I guess just recall that schools really are a reflection of the community that they serve. And so from that standpoint, we want to talk a little bit about you guys now. So Brian's talked a little bit about the particulars and Dr. Brenner about the strategic plan. I want to talk about the people in the community and how you can provide some input. And so with that idea that our schools are a reflection of the community, we've got community engagement opportunity here in front of us, and it really provides an important opportunity for you folks who are impacted by any of the decisions we make to provide that input into the process. That becomes really particularly important as we look to you being potential decision makers in this process through a potential referendum and those types of things. And so just some of the examples that we have when we look at doing community engagement, in fact, really include things like referendum planning, which we may be doing here, strategic plan development or modifications, which your community was involved in that process recently, changes to use of your community spaces within your schools, and also changes in attendance boundaries and those types of things. But anything that really impacts the community gives us an opportunity to engage you in that process. So what does that look like? It looks like a couple of different things. On a broad level, a macro level, if you will, it tends to be a little bit more voluntary, a little bit more general in the type of feedback that we get and the venues that we have to do that. It's very open-ended, and so things like tonight provide a really broad base of feedback to come into the process. And that might include some things like community forums that we're doing tonight, some gallery walks, community-wide surveying, and those types of things. We also have kind of a micro level or a more focused type of community engagement participation. Usually it goes deeper. It's probably a series of meetings, and we're looking for real intentional and specific types of feedback in that process. And so that might look like task forces and focus groups and that type of thing. And so what I guess I'm really proud of your school boards for doing is that they're really committed to doing all of these things. And so we're looking at a wide variety of ways to engage your communities in the direction forward in what we're looking to try to do in the school district. So what are we looking for here? We are looking for, as Dr. Brenner said early on, about 40 community members. And when we say community members, we're talking about truly community members. So it's really important, the school district, and I've got a slide in a minute, but there are many different opportunities for feedback to be gained by our school boards. It's really important, though, for the community to have their voice in this process. And so the school boards have committed here to really engage or have that engagement come from the community without administrative participation, without school board members participating in that group, so it can be organically the community's voice in that process. A broad and diverse representation of your entire communities. And so here we're not looking for the voice of just the parents, right? We're looking for our senior citizens. We're looking for younger people who don't have kids yet in school. We're looking for a broad representation of your community in a wide variety of manners to be participating in this process. We're going to meet approximately 12 times from March through September, about every other week. Thursdays from about 6 to 8:30, because there is some time involved in going through some of the subject matter that we're talking about. All the meetings will be open to the public, and so if you're not able to commit per se to a schedule that would have you meeting twice a month from March to September, that's quite a commitment. But all the meetings are open to the public, and so you can come, you can listen to the information, and there'll be opportunities to provide some feedback through the process to what you're hearing. All right. I thought I had one more item on there, but I guess I did not. So what are we going to be doing in those meetings? And I think that's important, obviously, for you to see. I think it's really exciting stuff that we talk about in those meetings. But we're going to be taking a look at what the strategic plan is, diving a little bit deeper into that, looking at what some of the programming things are that the district's doing, what some of the curriculum is, and really getting an understanding of what those things are. Because when we talk about facilities and technology and budgets and these types of resources, they truly have to support what's going on in the classroom. We are going to take a look at the building assessments that have been done in the district and try to really understand what is in there and what those mean. We are going to tour a number of the district facilities so we can, again, understand visually what we're seeing with a number of our schools. We're going to look at and understand what modern learning environments look like. So Brian had some pictures of a few things that were happening in other school districts that are what we sometimes refer to as 21st century learning. We're going to understand and dive a little bit into what that looks like. We're going to consider our operations and some of the operational costs we have and how that plays into an overall picture. We're going to look at financing options that we have. So it's great for us to have all kinds of ideas about where we want to go and what we want to do, but somehow we have to pay for that eventually, or most of it anyway. And so what are those financing options? What does that mean from a tax impact standpoint? There are many community and school needs of our facilities. So aside from the classrooms, what else do we need our facilities to provide for our communities? We're going to look at school capacity and location, because as our districts grow and populations move and change, right, are the school buildings that we have the right buildings for what we need, and are we maximizing their use? We're going to look at equity, which is a big thing for school districts these days. And we're going to eventually, by the end of this, come together and make some form of a recommendation to our school boards about what the community believes the right direction forward is. Now, in making those recommendations, the school boards here have a lot of things that they need to consider about the future. And so that includes things like staff input, engineering input, things that come to us from the state as far as state requirements, building codes, those types of things. We go in to modify a building that's 100 years old, like Central High School, sorry. You know, there are things that you get pushed into from a building code standpoint. We've heard several times, I think now, there's plenty of maintenance needs in quite a few of our buildings. We need to make sure we're looking at our best return on investment for these things, both from the student achievement standpoint, but also, you know, from a fiscal standpoint. And then, of course, there's a community engagement process. And these are kind of the high points. There's a number of other things we could probably put on this list. But the important part is that your school boards have committed to understanding that your voice through this community engagement process is a really important component here that they want to consider. And I will tell you, not every school district does that. And so I'm thrilled that your school boards are willing to do that and involve you in this process. So as we do this, we're going to try to lay the foundation tonight for some of what the work of the task force is doing. So I really would encourage you, if you're interested at all in participating, please fill out an application. We've got a web address here that you can do it right online as well if you don't want to do it on paper. Actually makes it a little easier for us because then we don't have to convert it. But nonetheless, what we want to do is give you guys an opportunity to lay a foundation for that task force. So when that task force starts meeting, that we can share some information right up front about what the community's thoughts and feelings are now. And so we're going to go through a couple of activities tonight in your small group sessions. The first is, I don't know if many of you have been involved in the past in what we call a SWOT analysis. This is similar to that if you've been involved in that. And what we really want you to do is we're going to go through a process to let you provide some input on what you brag about, what you worry about, what you wonder about, and what you'd bet on when it comes to your thoughts on the Grand Forks School Districts. And so we're going to go through that process and get your input. And then what we want to do is we want to understand what you believe at this point, with the limited amount of knowledge that you have at this point, what those priorities are that the task force should be thinking about. And so anytime we go through a process of learning and exploring and then trying to develop some options, there's priorities, right? And so what are your priorities? What's reflective of the community that's here tonight, at least, as to what some of those priorities are that the task force should consider? And then lastly, as we think about the future and we think about trying to resolve some of the challenges we have, and understanding that in resolving those challenges we have great opportunities that we can affect students with, what are some of those opportunities that as the task force is working through this process that they might consider, that you believe are really some tremendous opportunities that we really need to be thinking about as we go through this work? And so if we can answer those three questions tonight, we'll lay a really good foundation for that engagement task force. And then there is the follow-up question that you can take. You can do it tonight, you can take it home, but that's the thought exchange question that we'll give you some information on so that we can continue that conversation after we leave tonight. And so we appreciate your time here tonight. This has been relatively short, but the real work comes in the small groups. And then this is the web address for the application if you want to do that online. It's just a series of fairly simple questions. And it's tinyurl.com, GFSD application, and I will apologize. We incorrectly put what you typically probably see as an acronym for the Grand Forks. We put Grand Forks School District. We know you're Grand Forks Public Schools, but unfortunately, when we created that address, we were thinking school district, so I apologize for that. Anyway, thank you, and I'm not the one that knows exactly what you're supposed to do, but I think you're going out these doors and people will help direct you if you have a number, and if you don't, check with somebody in the back.
Just follow what Tom said. It'd be the easiest. I think if you all head to the east door, we have people directing you down to the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade